The moon court gathered under a silver sky, torches burning low as tradition demanded. This was not a celebration, it was a reckoning. Leora stood at the edge of the circle, hands folded calmly before her, white ceremonial cloak brushing the frost-covered stone. Her omega scent was muted, carefully controlled as it had always been. She had learned young that softness invited cruelty. Tonight, however, she did not tremble. Across from her stood Alpha Kyle Draven, heir to the Black Fang Pack and the man fate had bound her to at birth. Her mate, he did not look at her. That alone told her everything. The elders formed a half-circle between them, ancient symbols glowing faintly beneath their boots. The air vibrated with tension, pack members whispering from the shadows. Everyone knew why they were here. Kyle had returned victorious from war, and he had returned with another woman at his side, a beta, beautiful, strong, desired, not an omega. The High Elder's voice rang out. Alpha Kyle Draven, do you accept the bond bestowed by the moon goddess upon you and Omega Leora Vale? Silence stretched. Leora lifted her chin slightly. She had practiced this moment in her mind for years, since she first realized what Kyle's indifference meant, since she understood that fate did not guarantee love. Kyle finally spoke. I do not. The words struck the circle like a blade. Gasps rippled through the crowd. An Omega rejection was rare. An Alpha rejection, public, ceremonial, was nearly unheard of. The High Elder stiffened. Alpha, you understand the consequence. I do, Kyle said sharply. I will not bind myself to an Omega who cannot stand beside me as an equal. Leora felt the bond shudder, not break, but fracture painfully, like ice cracking beneath still water. Her chest burned, her wolf whimpered, but she did not fall. Kyle continued, his voice firm, rehearsed. Leora is gentle, kind, but I lead a pack that demands strength. I need a mate who inspires fear in our enemies, not sympathy. Eyes turned to her. Pity. Always pity. The beta woman beside Kyle, Mireia, lowered her gaze, but her scent flared with quiet triumph. The High Elder turned slowly toward Leora. Omega Leora Vale, do you accept this rejection? This was the moment Omegas usually broke, cried, begged, collapsed. Leora inhaled and smiled. I do, she said clearly. The circle froze. Kyle's head snapped toward her at last, surprise flashing across his features. I accept your rejection, Leora continued, her voice steady, carrying far beyond the stone ring. Freely, without resentment. A murmur spread. Kyle frowned. Then this matter is settled. No, Leora said gently. One word, enough to silence the court. She took a single step forward. The bond tugged painfully, but she held herself upright, eyes never leaving Kyle's. Now, she said, you will accept mine. Shock rippled outward like a wave. Kyle stared. What are you saying? Leora lifted her hand and pressed it over her heart, where the bond glowed faintly beneath her skin. I reject you, Alpha Kyle Draven. The words fell soft and absolute. The bond screamed. Gasps turned into outright chaos. Elders surged forward. Someone shouted for restraint. Kyle staggered back a half step, eyes wide, breath hitching as the severing bond lashed through him. Sharp, brutal, humiliating. You can't, he began. I can, Leora said, and I have. Her wolf, quiet her entire life, rose within her, steady and unafraid. I was given to you by fate, she continued, but I choose myself. The bond snapped, not violently, cleanly. The backlash slammed into Kyle like a physical blow. He dropped to one knee, hand braced against the stone, breath ragged. No Alpha had been rejected by an Omega in living memory, especially not publicly, especially not him. Leora felt the pain too, but beneath it was something unexpected, relief. She turned to the elders. By moon law, the bond is severed. I claim no compensation. I ask no protection. The High Elder stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. Do you understand what you're giving up? Yes, Leora replied. And what I'm gaining? She faced the pack one last time. I was born an Omega, she said, but I was never weak. Then she turned her back on her former Alpha and walked out of the moon court alone. Behind her, Kael Draven knelt in silence, his power shaken, his pride shattered, his fate altered by the Omega he thought would beg. He did not yet understand what he had lost, but he would. The snow outside the moon court burned cold against my skin, but inside I felt something hotter, a freedom I hadn't known I could claim. I had rejected him. Alpha Kael Draven, my mate by fate, by law, by every expectation this pack had ever held for me. And yet, I had stood tall when the world expected me to crumble. I had accepted his rejection, yes, but not out of humility or despair. I had accepted it because I was done waiting for someone to see me as more than an Omega, more than a shadow behind a crown that had never been mine. The bond between us still pulsed faintly beneath my skin, but it no longer burned with longing. It had shifted, hollowed, like a river redirected. I felt its absence like a liberation I'd waited a lifetime for. I had imagined 1,000 ways I could respond if Kael rejected me, pleading, collapsing, begging for him to reconsider. I had imagined tears and humiliation, a spectacle to satisfy the court's hunger for drama. But when the moment came, I realized something profound. The world does not demand my tears, it demands my truth. And my truth was simple. I deserved more than being discarded for weakness I had never possessed. Walking from the stone circle, the council murmured behind me, whispering speculation. Pack members avoided my gaze, even some elders, those whose eyes once bored into me with silent judgment, paused. They saw it. Not the Alpha kneeling in disbelief. Not the shocked whispers of my peers. They saw me. I walked alone, cloak brushing the frost-hardened stones, wolf shivering in my chest, rising like a tide. The bond had fractured entirely, leaving only an echo of Kael's presence, a reminder, sharp and lingering, of what could have been. I paused at the outer gates. The snow glinted in pale moonlight. My reflection shimmered faintly in the icy ground, a woman, small yet unyielding. I had spent years training myself to appear meek, to control every pulse of scent, every twitch of expression, to survive. And now, in one act, that training became my strength. I did not cry. I did not stumble. I inhaled the cold air, tasted freedom, and exhaled it slowly, as though releasing the weight of an entire life spent bending to someone else's power. In the weeks that followed, I learned just how sharp that power could be when wielded correctly. Kael did not follow me. He could not immediately. The bond had been severed cleanly, and Moon Law dictated that any Omega who rejected an Alpha could not be pursued under the threat of retaliation. Yet I sensed him everywhere, in the way the pack's whispers changed, in the tension between family heads, in the subtle shifts of loyalty as men and women recalibrated their alliances. He had underestimated me, and underestimating me would be his greatest mistake. I moved quietly, claiming spaces and forming quiet networks, not through fear, not through dominance, but through intelligence. Knowledge, F the city, of the pack, of alliances. I approached elders, betas, even lower-ranking soldiers, not as an Omega needing protection, but as one who could stabilize chaos. I didn't need a crown to wield influence, I needed their trust. That was more dangerous than fear. Far more. Each day I trained my wolf, listening to its low growl, its sharp instincts, letting it guide me. Not to fight Kael, at least not yet, but to ensure that if he tried to regain control, I would not be caught unprepared. Power, I realized, was never about emotion. It was preparation, patience, and patience again. And patience I had in abundance. The first test came quietly, A minor council dispute threatened to split the northern clans. Normally, Kyle would have been present to mediate. He was not. I stepped in, my voice was calm, unwavering, my decisions precise. Men who had never answered to me nodded, agreed, and implemented the resolutions I suggested. No one realized the quiet revolution until weeks later, when the northern clans reported that they followed me more willingly than any alpha. I did not gloat. I did not taunt. I simply existed as someone capable of being more than he expected. That was enough. I began to rebuild my life outside the shadow of the moon court. Friends I had long ignored. Those who had never seen the supposed Omega Leora veil as anything but background began to seek my counsel. I guided them in ways I had never dared before, shaping quiet strategies, influencing alliances, and strengthening the foundations of our pack. And all the while, I carried one truth close to my chest. Kyle had made a choice. I had made mine. My rejection of him was not born of spite, though the desire for justice stirred sometimes. It was born of clarity. Clarity about my worth, my path, and the fact that no mate, no matter how powerful, could define me. One night, as I walked through the frost-dusted woods, I sensed a presence behind me, a shift in the air, subtle but unmistakable. My wolf bristled, eyes narrowing. I turned to see Kyle standing there, tall, commanding, the very essence of alpha dominance, but diminished somehow, like a king who had lost his throne. He spoke first, quiet, almost reverent. "You accepted my rejection." "Yes," I said. My voice carried over the snow-laden forest. "I accept what you chose." And now, I paused, letting the words sink into the silence. "You will accept mine." For a moment he said nothing. He had faced enemies, storms, and battles that tested the limits of his strength, yet he faltered in the face of my simple, unflinching declaration. The bond between us pulsed faintly, a reminder that what was once destined had been undone by choice, and that he had underestimated the consequences. Kyle's eyes searched mine, dark and stormy. "You reject me?" "I do," I said, freely, fully, and without regret. "You cannot have what you refuse to value." He stepped closer, tension coiling around him. You do not understand the danger. By rejecting me publicly." "I understand perfectly," I interrupted. "I understand that I am stronger than silence. I understand that my power is my own. And I understand that your pride will take longer to recover than your body ever could." The wind shifted between us, carrying the scent of frost and the subtle musk of our wolf instincts. I held my ground. My heart thudded, not with fear, but with clarity. I was no longer the Omega who had waited for approval, the girl who had imagined love as validation. I was Leora Vale, the one who had chosen herself, and whose rejection now echoed with authority. He fell silent. Finally, the only movement the faint flutter of his wolf's agitation. I took a step back, maintaining the boundary of snow and distance between us. "You may think you are still the alpha," I said softly, letting my words slice through the tension, "but an alpha without respect is nothing. You have been revealed, not as my superior, but as a man who underestimated an Omega." Kyle did not respond. He could not. The realization of loss, humiliation, and shifted balance pressed into him with the weight of the moon goddess herself. I turned and walked away, each step leaving frost imprints behind me, marks of the path I now claimed. I did not look back. I did not need to. I had already won something far greater than his desire or approval. I had won my own destiny, and the moon, high and silver above the snow, bore witness to it all. The palace felt empty. The halls that once vibrated with the steps of loyal soldiers and whispered fear were now silent. I walked alone, each footstep echoing like a verdict I could not escape. I had faced armies. I had stared down rival packs, broken bones, and dissolved alliances with nothing but my gaze. I had survived betrayal, deceit, and death. But none of that prepared me for this, the sting of rejection by the Omega I had been born to claim, and lost by my own arrogance. "Leora." She had stood there in the moon court, calm, collected, unshakable, when I told her I did not accept the bond, when I rejected her. And then, worse, she had rejected me in return. The first time I saw her after that moment, I had felt the ground beneath me tremble. Not literally, but in the deepest part of me that had never doubted my authority. Her walk, the lift of her chin, the steadiness of her wolf all screamed, "I am no one's possession." The council meetings that followed were unnerving. My subordinates glanced at me differently. They no longer obeyed instinctively. Their loyalty wavered. It was subtle at first, a pause before responding, hesitation in delivering reports. Then came the questioning, always polite, always measured. They weren't challenging me, but they were no longer compelled by my presence alone. It was disorienting. I realized with sharp clarity that my authority had been inseparable from her. My leadership had relied on the balance she provided. Without her, I was raw and exposed. One morning, Marco entered my private chambers with unusual caution. "Alpha, the northern clans are requesting a vote on their leadership. They want input on who should guide them." I frowned. "Input? Did they not previously defer to my command?" "They deferred to you," he said, carefully choosing his words. "Now they want guidance." I closed my eyes. Guidance. Not obedience, not respect. Guidance. The subtle shift stung more than any battle wound ever had. Weeks later, a minor skirmish erupted on the southern border. Normally, I would have quelled it in hours. This time, word reached me that the opposition had slipped away unharmed, not out of mercy, but out of careful calculation by my own counsel. They did not fear me as before. They tested me subtly, silently. They were no longer sure I could respond. And they were right. I had underestimated Leora. I had assumed that an Omega, no matter how sharp or clever, would bend before me. I had assumed the bond was a guarantee, not an agreement of mutual respect. My confidence had been absolute. Until the moment she told me to accept her rejection, I replayed it constantly in my mind. Her voice, soft yet unwavering, the calm in her gaze, her wolf's strength matching her words. I could not lie to myself. She had claimed her power with precision I had never possessed. She had taken the one thing I assumed would anchor me and used it to unmoor me completely. I tried to reclaim control. I summoned my lieutenants. I ordered patrols. I sent envoys to old allies, but every action I took now had hesitation baked into it. Every response I gave was measured against a new truth. Leora could operate without me. She could influence the pack without my name attached. She had survived me. She had thrived because she had been rejected. The physical bond, the mystical thread that connected our fates, still pulsed faintly under my skin. Every attempt to draw strength from it met resistance. It recoiled like a living thing, reminding me that her rejection was not just words. It was authority. It was dominance, in a form I had never understood. I walked through the city one night, disguised, unaccompanied, just to see the shifts firsthand. Merchants, guards, and betas glanced at her name with respect and admiration, whispering about her strategies and her poise. She had taken the undercurrent of loyalty I had relied on for years and rerouted it, quietly, without force. A knot formed in my chest. Rage, humiliation, fear, they intertwined like storm clouds, heavy and black. My wolf growled softly, tension thrumming through my veins. I could have attacked her then, called her before the court, demanded the bond be restored, but every instinct warned me she was untouchable now, not because of fear, but because of skill, strategy, and clarity. I had survived everything else, but I could not survive underestimating her. One night, I cornered myself in my chambers, staring into the mirror. The man staring back was strong, fierce, relentless, but empty. The weight the alpha mantle pressed down, heavier than it had ever been. And the reason for that weight, the pillar of stability I had relied on, was gone. She had removed it with nothing more than words, and my own failure to value her had done the rest. I thought about seeking her out, forcing a confrontation, proving myself. But deep down, I knew it would be pointless. She would not yield. She had no need to. And any misstep on my part could undo everything left of my influence. Instead, I observed. I watched as the pack shifted, as loyalties realigned, as my enemies grew bolder, not by choice, but because they no longer feared me unconditionally. The final blow came quietly. A faction I had counted as loyal defected, pledging support to her strategies, following her guidance over my commands. It was done politely, without insult, without fanfare, simply a transfer of allegiance. I had lost before a sword was drawn. My empire had quietly slipped through my fingers. I was an alpha in name only. The Moon Court had witnessed my rejection, and the city had witnessed my fall. I could rebuild, yes, but only by reckoning with the woman who had shattered everything I thought immutable. Leora had done something few ever could. She had made me powerless, and yet left me alive to understand why. I sat in the darkness, alone, reflecting. Pain, humiliation, and grudging respect intertwined in a complex knot. I could rage, I could strike back, but the truth was undeniable. The Omega I had dismissed had been my equal, my superior in every way that mattered. And she had told me, with perfect clarity, I accept your rejection, now accept mine. It was more than a sentence. It was a sentence I would live with forever. From that night onward, I became something I had never been. A king without subjects, a wolf without dominance, a man who had been unseated by an Omega whose strength I had refused to see until it was too late. The world after the Moon Court had shifted beneath my feet, but unlike Kael, I did not stumble. I had rejected him. I had severed the bond. And now I could see the truth that had always been there. My power was not in being chosen, but in choosing myself. I began quietly. First, I reconnected with the betas, soldiers, and advisors who had always respected me, but had never been permitted real influence. I did not call myself a leader. I did not demand allegiance. I offered stability, guidance, and vision, and watched as they leaned in. Even the elders noticed. They did not speak of it openly, but the subtle nods, the reconsidered glances, the private inquiries, all of it was acknowledgement. I did not rush. The mistakes of impatience were evident everywhere, and I had learned from Kael's arrogance. To be powerful, I had to move like water, slow, persistent, and inevitable. The first major test came when the northern clans threatened to defy the Moon Court's decrees. Kael would have moved armies, invoked loyalty, demanded obedience. I moved quietly, approaching the elders, with carefully reasoned arguments, appealing to logic, tradition, and the shared understanding that unnecessary conflict would weaken the pack. By the time Kael heard of my intervention, the crisis had been diffused, not by force, but by foresight. I remember the moment my wolf fully emerged, not the trembling, subdued companion that had hidden for years. This wolf moved with confidence, instincts aligned perfectly with mine, ready to act, but always with purpose. It was no longer a tool of survival. It was an extension of my will. Kael watched from a distance as I knew he would. The Alpha who had once commanded unwavering loyalty now realized he had no power over the Omega who had chosen herself. His pride bristled visibly, yet he could do nothing. He could not challenge me directly, not without exposing himself as weak. I established channels that had previously belonged to him. Communications, resource management, alliance building, all quietly redirected. The city adapted quickly. People follow strength, yes, but they follow wisdom more willingly than fear. And I had both. One evening, a group of young Omegas approached me with questions. They had been intimidated by Kyle, restricted in their growth, forced into submission. Now they looked to me. "You are different," one said softly. "Stronger." I smiled faintly. Strength does not come from dominance. It comes from knowing your value and refusing to compromise it. Power without respect is hollow. Do not make He same mistake that your alpha did. The girls nodded, understanding more than words could convey. Each one I guided became a ripple in a growing current. Soon, even Kyle's allies began reporting to me, consulting me in private, seeking guidance they would never have dared ask from him. And still, I did not act from vengeance. Kyle had learned his lesson, painfully and publicly. I did not need to humiliate him further. I only needed to ensure that he would never regain the authority he had lost through arrogance. In the moonlight, I often walked alone through the forests surrounding our city, reflecting on the past. It had taken courage to reject him publicly, more courage to step away from the security he represented, but in doing so I had claimed something far more valuable: autonomy. I had once been an Omega, overlooked, invisible, considered fragile, but rejection had taught me resilience, loss had taught me foresight, and the silence after the moon court had shown me how to rise without the need for validation. When Kyle finally dared to approach me again, I was ready, not with anger, not with confrontation, but with awareness. He sought answers, perhaps reconciliation, perhaps dominance. I gave him neither. I gave him truth. I was whole without him, stronger than he could ever be, and capable of commanding respect, not through fear, but through intelligence, strategy, and unwavering will. The moon bore witness to it all, as it had the night of our rejection. It had seen him kneel and me walk away. Now it watched him strain for relevance, and me stride freely, a queen without a throne, a leader without declaration. Kyle's pride remained, his alpha instincts sharp, but they no longer dictated the pack's obedience. I had reshaped the hierarchy not by force but by merit, and with every decision I made I saw the subtle threads of loyalty strengthen toward me. One evening the council gathered in a neutral hall. Normally Kyle would preside, but tonight the eyes of elders and betas turned toward me. "You have stabilized the northern clans, redirected resources without loss, and maintained peace where others would have escalated war," an elder acknowledged. "Your wisdom guides us better than the strength of a single alpha ever could." I inclined my head. "I act only in the pack's best interest." "That is the measure of leadership," the council murmured in agreement. Kyle remained silent, seated in shadow. He could no longer command. He could only witness, and that was enough. In private, I reflected on the path I had walked. Rejection had once seemed like a wound, a humiliation I would never recover from. But I had transformed it into a weapon far sharper than claws or fangs: self-respect. Authority born of choice, not of imposition. Confidence that did not require validation from a mate, a pack, or even the moon goddess herself. I had outgrown the one who had underestimated me, and in doing so, I had outgrown the old rules of power. The city fed. The pack adapted. The moon watched silently, and I knew, whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms. No alpha, no mate, no bond, only me. And for the first time in my life, that was more than enough. The moon hung low over Valamora, silver and cold, casting long shadows over the forest clearing where we met. No council, no witnesses, no pack members, just the two of us in the night. Kyle Draven stepped from the tree line, eyes dark and intense, wolf instincts coiled, yet cautious. The alpha who had once dominated every corner of the city now moved with hesitation, the first true signs of vulnerability I had ever seen. I met his gaze steadily. My wolf stirred within me, not in aggression but in recognition of the challenge that had always been there. Kyle had underestimated me once. He would not make that mistake again. Yet he had no power here. Not over me, not tonight. You could have walked away and left the pack to follow me, he said quietly, voice low, almost reverent. Why didn't you? I tilted my head. Because I don't need to chase what I've never wanted. You were never my path, Kyle. You were a lesson. And I have learned it fully. His lips tightened. You have strength I did not anticipate. I have clarity, I corrected. Strength without direction is dangerous. Clarity without action is useless. I have both. Kyle fell silent, pacing slowly. Do you know what you've done? Yes, I said. I've claimed my freedom. I've reclaimed my power. I've refused a man who believed he could dictate my life. He laughed bitterly, a low sound of disbelief. I am the Alpha. The city bends to my command. All should fear me, obey me. And yet, here you are, I interrupted, kneeling to the reality you cannot change. Your pack respects me more than you now. Your choices left you exposed. You thought one night of indulgence would change nothing, but it changed everything. You lost the bond, the respect, and the control you assumed was yours by right, and I survived it all. The wind stirred between us, cold and sharp, carrying the scent of our intertwined wolves, a reminder of what could have been. Kyle's jaw clenched, wolf instinct thrumming as he fought against the realization he could not dominate me. He had ruled for years, but he had never faced an Omega who could rival him in strategy, patience, and precision. I stepped closer, calm, deliberate. I accepted your rejection when you cast me aside, Kyle. I let it go because anger is wasted energy. But now you must accept mine. Understand it, live with it, learn from it. His wolf growled softly, frustrated, restless. His alpha dominance could not touch me. It had no tether to bind me. And yet, he did not attack. He could not. Respect, reluctant admiration curled through him, unspoken but undeniable. I underestimated you, he admitted, voice breaking the night's stillness. I thought fear and authority were enough. I didn't see, didn't feel how strong you were, how capable. I shook my head. You still don't understand. It wasn't about strength, it was about choice. You chose recklessness. I chose myself. He looked away briefly, struggling with pride and humility. Could this have been different? No, I said firmly. Not after the betrayal. Not after the rejection. The bond, the path, the pack. It all shifted the moment you decided you were above responsibility. The rest was consequence. Kyle sank to one knee, a posture I'd never imagined him taking voluntarily. His head bowed, wolf low and quivering, not in submission to me, but in acknowledgement. The Alpha had never been humbled before, and now, in silence, he recognized my victory. I knelt slightly in return, maintaining eye contact. Do not mistake this for mercy, I said softly. This is closure. You may rise tomorrow, but you will never command me. You will never reclaim what you assumed was yours by right, and you will not dictate the future of this pack without me. He exhaled slowly, steadying his breath. I accept it, he said. I accept your rejection. The words, simple yet profound, carried with them the weight of years, of power, of pride shattered and rebuilt in truth. My wolf relaxed, muscles loosening in quiet triumph. You have learned well, I said. Now live with it. Let it guide you, or let it destroy you. That is your choice. He nodded, slowly rising to his full height, dignity intact but forever altered. The Alpha who had once commanded without question now walked with humility, a man forced to confront the consequences of indulgence and arrogance. We parted silently. He disappeared into the tree line, leaving the moonlit clearing to me. The pack would follow the one who held clarity, vision, and unshakable resolve, and that was me. The city, the forests, the clans, they would adapt. They always did. The moon goddess watched silently, bearing witness to a lesson she had delivered not with thunder, but with snow, silence, and choice. I stood alone, wolf quiet now, the bond entirely severed yet lingering as a faint reminder of a path never taken. Freedom, power, authority, all mine earned without domination, without coercion, without vengeance. Kyle Draven was an alpha in name only, humbled by circumstance and the consequences of ignoring the one he was meant to cherish. And I, the Omega he had rejected, the Omega he had underestimated, was whole. The moonlight spilled over my shoulders, silver and commanding. I breathed deeply, tasting the cold air, feeling my wolf pulse in perfect alignment. For the first time in my life, I knew what it meant to rise fully on my own. I had accepted his rejection, and he had finally, painfully, accepted mine. The forest was silent, the city beyond slept unaware, and I walked into the future, not as someone's mate, not as someone's subordinate, but as Yoravale, the Omega who had become unshakable. No chains, no compromises. No alpha could ever take that from me. The moon watched, and I smiled faintly, knowing the night had witnessed a truth far older than any pack law. Some bonds are meant to be broken, some strength is meant to be claimed, and some victories come not from force, but from choice. And with that I turned, walking away from the clearing, leaving the fallen alpha behind, the snow crunching beneath my boots, carrying my own destiny forward, untouched, undeniable, unstoppable. More stories are coming soon. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.